Welcome back to the Checkered Flag Podcast. I am co-host Drew, joined here with Nate, where we'll be talking about the checkers and wreckers of the Goodyear 500. It's been a couple of weeks since you've seen us. We did take a little bit of a break from the podcast, but we are back, and back more than ever because we have a four-time winner this season, Tyler Reddick. How about that?
Yeah, Tyler Reddick's off to a phenomenal start. Like we were talking before we started filming here, he's got a 95-point gap on the next second place Ryan Blaney right now. Bubba Wallace falls back from second to third. But yeah, Tyler Reddick, amazing performance out of him today. I don't think anything can be said to really, compliment how good of a job he did. He suffered having to get a battery replaced mid-race, gets that replaced, starts back at the back of the pack after qualifying on the pole, and then drives all the way through the field with no cooling suit. His brakes were messing up midway through the race, and manages to just have a rocket of a car out there and finish first. So, I don't know what the heck they're doing on that 45 team, but it's working.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I thought as soon as Reddick went, back towards like 20th, 25th place after that first bad pit stop where they then get the lug tight on his wheel, I thought there was no way he'd catch up this quickly. But by the end of the first stage, he was already up to second, and he almost got past the leader, Keselowski, who did win both stages. So, Tyler Reddick definitely was the highlight of the race. Reminded me a lot of Blaney over at Phoenix a couple weekends ago, where Blaney had a couple pit problems and then ended up passing the field twice and ended up taking the win. We saw that again today with Tyler Reddick. So there's something going on with the fastest car of the day. Like, the race would be a lot more boring if you had a guy like Blaney, who had the fastest car, Phoenix, dominate the entire time. You had a guy like Reddick that, would have dominated this entire Darlington race. It's fun. Obviously, it's not fun on the drivers to make mistakes, have the pit crews make mistakes, but at least we had some variety up front because we didn't want to see another person lead, 90% of the race like Chase Briscoe did in the fall. So definitely some really good racing, not the best racing, but Tyler Reddick does get the fourth win of this year. Some other notable finishers. How about Carson Hocevar, man?
Yeah, he did really well. What did he end up finishing? He got did he get in the top 5, right?
Yeah, I believe he got fourth, and I think
Fourth.
he started 36 because I think in qualifying the day before, I think he slapped the wall, had to change something on the rear of the car. What a drive by that young man, honoring the Dale Earnhardt paint scheme, the Chili's, says Marg Machine on the back, honoring, can't remember what it said on Dale's car, but wow, that paint scheme was sexy. Good to see that car get a top 5. Awesome, awesome drive by Carson Hocevar. But, the Fords, they're back. They are here. We finally saw the Fords actually do something. And it wasn't just Penske. RFK was up there. You had, I think it was just RFK and Penske, to be honest with you.
Pretty much RFK and Penske, but yeah. No, and speaking of paint schemes, the Biffle tribute by the RFK guys, I loved that. I think that was amazing. The only thing I am a little bit disappointed was that we didn't see more. Obviously, they didn't, dedicate this as throwback weekend for this year. I was a little disappointed not to see a whole lot of other teams participating. I think we had a couple other stragglers that were in there, but they just weren't talked about. Obviously, Hocevar with that Dale Earnhardt paint scheme, and then the RFK guys with the Greg Biffle paint scheme. So it was nice to see those guys out there, and especially for those Biffle paint schemes to be running up front, paying tribute to the man, and you're able to pretty much all those cars ended up finishing well. I mean, Priest finished 13th, Chris Buescher finished 9th, and Keselowski obviously the runner up, and he led quite a few laps out there today. So good to see those cars running up front.
Yeah, and I was super grateful to see the Greg Biffle throwbacks running up front. I know that this was a huge weekend for RFK. We know the success they've had at this track in the past. We saw Brad Keselowski win this race back in 2024 when Chris Buescher and Tyler Reddick got into it. So, Tyler Reddick's really good at this track, but so are the RFK Fords, and we saw that again today. I think I remember at one point they were running first, second, and third in the middle of stage 2 or beginning of stage 3. So really strong performance out of RFK, and that's something that we've needed out of this team since we've come from the Cookout Clash back at Bowman Gray before the season started. But some other notable finishers, excuse me, Austin Cindric. Where was Logano? You saw Blaney at third, Cindric fifth, Logano. I think Larson finished in front of Logano, and Larson had a toe link broken with 10 laps to go and still finished ahead. What happened to that 22 car? They did not have it today.
Yeah, I don't know. It's disappointing to see Joey Logano finishing so far back. I mean, for some people, I'm not a huge Logano guy, so I like seeing him finish at the back. Uh, but there is, from what we saw out of Penske today, especially, I feel like Joey should not have been finishing as far back as he did. Um, He's back there in 33rd place. Like you said, Kyle Larson finished in
Jesus.
32nd, right there in front of him, and his car was broken at the end of the race. So, I don't know what's going on with that 22 team. Seems like they've been struggling. It seems like the last couple of races, the 22 has been like one of the slower Penske cars, in my opinion. I feel like Cindric's been on a hotter stretch lately. Obviously, Blaney is on kind of fire right now, as much as he can be. That Reddick's taking his thunder, but um, yeah, I don't know what we're gonna need to see out of that 22 team to get him up there with his teammates.
And it was so weird because Cindric was running top 10, Blaney was running top 10, Logano was he was getting outdone by Cody Ware before Ware ran into some problems. How? Cody Ware consistently runs 30th or worse. And if you're getting outperformed by a Rick Ware racing car in the Powerhouse 4 team, there is something wrong. Granted, Kevin Harvick briefly talked about it in the booth that Joey Logano may have tried his setup from the year previously because Logano had a top 5, top 10 car during that race. At the same time, you got to also factor in new horsepower, new changes to the car. They made the car a little bit lighter, so maybe they've just completely missed on the setup, or maybe they tried something different that Cindric and Blaney didn't do. But that is not something you need to see out of a champion, 3-time champion. You don't want to see him run as bad as as this race was. And looking ahead in the chase in the format, how this playoff system works, finishes like this are gonna put you in a deeper hole, especially if you've had a pretty rough start to the season. I don't even think Logano's in the top 20 in points. Or, no, he is. He's 16th
Yeah,
place. He's the last person in the chase right now, getting outperformed by Shane Van Gisbergen. So, one thing's for sure, something's up with Logano's team. They need to get it figured out for Martinsville next week, and we know how good of a short track racer he is. But man, what an interesting day for that 22 car. But talked about Kyle Larson, was running top 5, top 10 all day. Had a broken toe link, got into the wall with 10 laps to go, had to make a pit stop, unfortunately, and then went a couple of laps down, was just nursing that car home. Riley Herbst, we saw how dominant, the 2311 cars were in the beginning of the race, and we know Riley Herbst slacks a little bit, but, was running top 10, top 15, and then, of course, got into an accident, killed the right front of the bumper, never was really in contention. But man, Bubba Wallace, I feel so bad for that man too, because he ran into the same problem as Reddick and who was it? Reddick and Blaney. They both had to get the lugs tightened on their car, and I don't think Bubba could ever come back from that. I mean, what was that accident? What did he create? Did he cause that accident with Hamlin and Jones? I can't remember. Really unfortunate to see what with Bubba. Had a really good car. I mean, was running top 5 that first stage, then, got into some mechanical problems, just was never really in contention again. So bad day for Bubba. Good stage points, but unfortunate the way it went down. But is there anyone else that you want to talk about that finished well today? Or I feel like we've hit everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest ones that I had written down right now are obviously Brad and Reddick and Hocevar. You know, we did see some good finishes out of, like, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the teams a little bit here that we're seeing starting to take the lead here in these first, what are we, 6 races in now? Um Obviously 2311, JGR, those two are top of their game right now. I don't think anybody's catching up to them with what they've got going on right now, especially if they can carry this momentum going throughout the entirety of the season. Obviously, it's a long season, a lot of races left, a lot of season left for everybody else to figure it out. But those two are going to be hard to catch right now, especially with that points gap that Reddick's got on everybody. I think the other two notable ones are RFK and Penske. RFK has been running well, not just at this race, but they've been running well at the last few races. So it's been nice to see a different blue oval team up front. Penske's been running up there well, more Ryan Blaney than anything. I think Logano's had some speed at times. Cindric's had speed at times, like we were just talking about. But when it comes to that fifth team right now, I can't decide if it's Hendrick or Spire. I'm kind of battling that in the back of my head right now. I'm seeing Carson Hocevar and Suarez, consistently getting some top 10 finishes. Whereas, I mean, we're still seeing Byron, Elliott, Larson getting those top 10 finishes as well with, wherever Alex Bowman's car is at, since he's not out there right now. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that those two are really competing for that fifth spot right now, and it's weird to see the bow ties kind of rounding out the top five because it's usually some like the manufacturer we see dominate throughout the season.
Yeah, and I will say Hendrick has been the best. I'm gonna make that clear. If you compare the finishes of Byron, Elliott, and Larson, comparison to McDowell, Suarez, Hocevar, take out the wild cards, the super speedways. Hendrick is going to be the dominant bow tie, and we saw that again today. Larson was the best Chevy in the beginning, and then Byron took that rollover. Suarez was in that top 8 to top 12 range the entire day. Had a great race for Suarez, and outdoing his old team Trackhouse. But I think that with Hocevar on the second to last run, he stayed out for a couple more laps than everyone else did. Same thing that Reddick did. And we saw Hocevar with those fresher tires just fly through the pack. So I think that's where, there was a little bit of a boost right there with Spire, but I think Hendrick is still the best Chevy team. But man, where has Trackhouse been?
Yeah.
I feel like Chastain is usually supposed to be the top dog, but even then he was running terribly the rest of the race. And I know you're wearing that Chastain shirt, so I'm sure you're disappointed to see how Trackhouse has been coming out the last couple of races.
Yeah, it's been disappointing to see. It's hard to watch. I mean, you don't even get to see them. They're not getting any TV time because they're just kind of back there in the middle of the pack. Like nobody's really paying attention to them. Nobody's calling on their name. SVG, unless it's a road course, I don't think we're going to be calling on his name too much. But he did get a finish over Chastain and Zilich. They all kind of finished in a group there: 14 for SVG, 16 for Chastain, and 18 for Zilich. But it's disappointing. These guys shouldn't be finishing as far back as they are, and I think it attributes to, the Hendrick engines versus the RCR engines. And this is the same problem we ran into last year, right? Like, you know, Kyle Busch, I don't even know where he finished at. He's a RCR guy. I mean, there's a bunch of, it's we're consistently seeing the Hendrick engines outperform the RCR engines, and the secondary Hendrick teams are outperforming, you know, the primary, I would say, RCR teams. So Spire is outperforming RC or yeah, Richard Childress Racing. So I mean, it's interesting to see um that difference, the gap that there is between the two manufacturer, I guess the two different engine manufacturers. So I don't know. You think that's what's playing a factor? Or do you think it might be something else?
I just think it's the new body. I think, yes, there is a gap between Hendrick engines and ECR engines, but typically it's not like a power problem. It's more of like a mechanical issue where we typically see more ECR engines blow in comparison to the Hendrick cars. So I really don't think it's much of an engine concern. I think it's more based on the new nose. Like I mentioned, the start of this season, they had 0 notes on this car. They had to kind of start everything fresh. Granted, not much of the car changed, but you got to factor in the aerodynamics, how the tires run, bump drafting, all these factors that play a role in a race. They had to start fresh, and now we're starting to get a feel of it more. So, we are seeing flashes of Chevy running up front, leading laps. We saw it at Vegas last week. So I think that they're slowly getting there, but I just think a couple more races, we'll definitely see more Chevys making their way into the top 15, into the top 10. And, Spire, Hendrick, looking great right now. They're off to a hot start. Even though a bow tie hasn't gotten a win yet, we're going to see one soon. And I know with Martinsville coming up next week, there's going to be a lot of Chevys that are good at that track that are going to be in contention at the end of the day. But other notable storylines: Alex Bowman out for his second weekend in a row. Justin Allgaier did sub in for that Chevrolet. Never really a factor. I think he was just wanting to log laps in, make sure that 48 car, in terms of the owner's points, is still, not falling too far behind. But do we think he's eliminated from contention already? I feel like there's way too much of a points gap right now to catch back up to.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at Alex Bowman, who's 302 points behind the leader right now. Obviously, there is a bit of a more true, like a bit easier of a gap between him and the cut line. There's about a 120-point gap, it looks like, between him and Joey Logano. But I mean, we haven't seen speed out of that car all year. I Even when Bowman was driving it, he was consistently, I guess he wasn't up there for too many races. He's been out for, I think this is his third week now in a row. But at the end of the day, even when he was driving that car, he wasn't driving it to anything really better. I don't think anything better than a 20th place finish. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's disappointing to see a Hendrick car that's finishing that far back. Like, we know they are the top team for the bow ties. We know that they are the ones that are expected to, you know, all those cars are expected to finish within the top 15, and all those cars have playoff expectations. Uh, so I think that honestly, it's going to be a hill that's really impossible to climb for him to get through it for the rest of the season, unless they're able to win a couple of races late.
Yeah, and we know that Alex Bowman is, he has a decent amount of wins in his career, but nothing really that shows like winning speed week in, week out that we see out of his teammates like Byron and Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson. Typically Alex Bowman wins. I'm not going to say some of them were lucky, but they were. He was just in the right place at the right time. We know Alex Bowman can be great, but putting yourself in this deep of a hole, granted it's not his fault, it's going to be tough to make it back up, especially now that we're 6 races in. That number just keeps getting less and less until we get to the chase at the beginning of September. So definitely a storyline to look at. Maybe he sneaks into the top 16, but right now I'm not liking it. I'm not liking the position he's in. But
Yeah.
other notable people in the standings. I mean, we did see some big moves. I feel like that gap from 5th on to like, I'd say we'll even go down to 17th and Michael McDowell. That's a 50-point gap right there. If any one of those drivers has a bad day, they're dropping 10 spots. If any one of them has a really good day, they're going to go up a ton of spots. And we saw that with Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Ryan Preece. Those guys had some really good days today, stage points, great finishes. But, a guy like Shane Van Gisbergen, no stage points, top 15. We saw him drop a lot of spots in the standings. So,
Yeah.
I think right now, we got 3 powerhouse teams. We got 2311, Joe Gibbs, Penske, Hendrick and RFK. And those people take up the first 12 spots of the
Yeah.
standings. So, there's definitely a gap right now in teams. And I think that the powerhouses, with the more funding and all that, those are the ones that are going to be playoff locks come halfway through the summertime when we're going to start looking into the playoffs and who are we liking. So, but yeah, that is the Goodyear 400. In terms of the broadcast and racing, how did you like Darrell Waltrip back in the booth?
I loved it. I mean, you guys know I like finishing it off with the good old boogity, 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 and it was good to hear that to start off the Goodyear 500 today.
400.
Or 400, sorry, my apologies. Got it mixed up with Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it was great to hear. I know that you especially have been, pretty critical of the Fox broadcast. I don't know that maybe it hasn't made the episodes that we've been filming. We had some technical issues that we were running into, but I know that between our conversations, you haven't necessarily, appreciated the style of commentary, and I think that it brought some electricity that was much needed to that booth.
Yeah. And I will say it's not getting much better. I mean, it's just like they're adding like special guests into the booth to try and make it a little better. But you have Mike Joy calling the race. Kevin Harvick still monologuing, even though he provides great insight. I do like listening to Harvick, but he's very monotonous, doesn't really get excited, doesn't get like, angry and stuff like that. They used to see out of guys like Darrell Waltrip and Larry Mack and even a younger Mike Joy. Like those guys put heart and soul into the booth. And now we're seeing these guys, it looks like they're just taking a paycheck and going week in, week out and just commentating the race how they want. Clint Boyer's still hard to understand sometimes. So not sure what's going on with that team, but we set a high standard because of what Prime did last year, and I cannot wait for Prime to be back because, man, as much as how iconic this weekend was to have all the NASCAR legends at the track, had Darrell Waltrip in the booth, still we get the same product of commentary week in, week out, and it's just not fun to listen into. So, we see a lot of criticism from the fans as well. 5 minutes of just shooting shit out of the ass, and then you go to side-by-side commercials, then another 5 minutes of them just talking about whatever, and then there's no excitement, engagement that you would see from a newer NASCAR fan, especially someone that's wanting to get into the sport. And you have this kind of commentary. I don't want to listen into the Masters. I want to listen into some
Yeah.
yay, it's some yeehaws kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like what the NASCAR Hell Yeah campaign. Like, why are we going back to those roots? Like, Clint Boyer can be like, oh, you say him get under one another. Like, I'm not gonna fucking listen to that shit, bro. But like, if he
Yeah.
gets excited and starts talking more about the if it's more enthusiastic in the broadcast in the booth, I think that a lot more engagement would happen. But I did read another thing about Fox and NASCAR. NASCAR isn't on the main Fox Sports channel. They're on FS1. They're not on Fox. And I think that that's a huge thing that's kind of killing the viewership of the sport right now. But, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that honestly wholeheartedly. Because if you, I mean, when I grew up, I grew up and I didn't always have like the FS1s or like the ESPNs. I some days like we just had the generic, what is it, 2 through 25 cable or whatever it was, and if you're growing up and, maybe you don't have as much, you aren't as privileged to be able to, afford those channels or whatever. Obviously, stuff's become more available nowadays. But I think just generically speaking, everybody kind of stays between those 2 through 25 cable channels, where they're not really venturing out into the FS1s of the world as much, especially with March Madness really on right now and competing for, you know, viewership. I think the best thing that they can do is switch it over to Fox, obviously, like what else is Fox going to be broadcasting at that time? Because I mean, The Simpsons has been on for God only knows how long and it interrupts everything. But let's use the main Fox broadcast to broadcast live sports, right? Like NBC broadcast on NBC. Prime obviously is not going to be able to be compared to this, but um, you know, you've got to be able to put your live sports on your main channels so that way people are able to see it. That's the way that they've got the most viewers on those channels, and that's where you're going to get the most people to be able to watch it.
100%. And the saying always goes, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And as much as streaming and platforms like that are pushed onto consumers, they're not going to want to switch from what they've been used to the last 30 to 40 years. And when you have someone that has cable and can't access a channel like Fox Sports 1 and not able to watch the race, viewership's going down. Like NASCAR needs to understand their target demographic. Granted, we're trying to target new audiences, get new type groups of demographics in there, but the older generation likes to stick with cable, especially in areas that aren't as, well formed, not well formed, but don't have the funding that, bigger cities can and all that stuff. Rural towns, like ones with ranches and stuff. Like those are the types of, deep rooted NASCAR fans that aren't tuning in, week out because they don't have access to it. So, I'm hoping down the road that, NASCAR is able to work with Fox. They've had a great relationship for the last 25 years. I really want them to get over from Fox Sports 1 over to Fox Sports because that's where everyone's going to watch the race. And you're going to even get more people to watch the race because people may just have it on in the background. So, but that's my take on that. But yeah, the Goodyear 400 had some really good mid pack racing. Obviously, a little bit boring up at the front. Tyler Reddick gets the win. Brad Keselowski, in my opinion, had the best day. But is there anything else you want to talk about before the Darlington Goodyear 400 before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna cover my top 5 of this week. Obviously, Tyler Reddick's gonna start it off. Guy's been dominant. It's hard to not even put him at number 1, especially with the way he started this season. My next guy is gonna be Blaney. I feel like he's always up in their contention. At least for this season, he has been. He's been in a fast car at almost every race. And I think the only thing that really holds him back is, if he gets into trouble or, if it's his pit crew that is ranked 33rd out of everybody uh, on the grid there, that's really holding him up. I've seen him get multiple loose tires or not completely tight lug nuts and had to stop in another person's pit box to get it tightened. So, hopefully his pit crew can solve some of those issues and he'll be able to start leaping forward and not having to fight his way back from the middle or back of the pack. Denny Hamlin's going to be my third driver for this week. I think he just had a solid finish. Nothing too crazy from that 11 team. Um, Finishes in 11th. But then it's obviously gets that win last week and is starting to get more speed as the season's been progressing on. Then I've got William Byron at number 4. I feel like he's been kind of sneakily in that top 10, just kind of sneaking into the top 10. He's been kind of like the Chris Buschers or the Ross Chastains of last year, where he's been kind of sneaking into that top 10 and just been getting solid finishes week in and week out, sitting at 6th in the point standings. So I'm happy to see with, Hendrick not necessarily getting a win yet, but Byron's still up there finishing well. And then my number 5 is going to be Ty Gibbs. I've really liked what I've seen out of Ty Gibbs these last a couple of weeks, and I think that you've kind of put the magnifying glass on him for me. Just really liked where he's been finishing, how he's been driving that car. Gets a sixth place finish today. Uh, Especially when people have been critical of him in the offseason. There was that stuff coming out where I think it was Denny Hamlin's old crew chief and talking about how Ty Gibbs gets treated better than everybody else and blah, blah, blah. Ty Gibbs is showing up. He's showing out lately. So, props to him. I love to see it. Uh, you know, Kind of just a middle finger to that, to him. He's like, you're going to talk shit. I'm just going to, race my race and I'm going to start performing better, and that's good to see out of him, young kid. So I'd like to see him keep that momentum going throughout the season. Then honorable mentions is just Brad Keselowski. Obviously, good to see him finishing up at the front of the pack this week. And then just RFK Racing in general with those Greg Biffle schemes. Loved seeing those up front, and good to see them all in general just kind of finishing in the top 15. So
Yeah. That is a solid top 5, and they always mention about the silver spoon. The silver spoon's bulletproof, and we've seen that the first 6 races. But top 5, very similar. Going to put Tyler Reddick at number 1. That's a given. If he didn't have the problems he had the last couple of weeks, he would still has 5 top 10s. So definitely the most dominant car out there. Is capable of winning any race and any week. So, Tyler Reddick's going to be a clear number 1 for a while. But Ryan Blaney, number 2, long run Ryan Blaney. We saw that again today in the middle of stage 3 and towards the end, got a second place finish. So really good to see, him continue to leave where he was left off last season. So strong top two in the standings. But my number 3 is going to be Ty Gibbs. And it's kind of, granted he's 11th in the points right now. He had a pretty abysmal start to the season, but think about this. The last 4 races, he got a 4th place at Coda, 4th place at Phoenix, a 5th place at Vegas, and now a 6th place at Darlington. 4 completely different tracks, gets a top 6 in all 4 of those races. He's definitely on a hot streak right now, and we're going to see that again at Martinsville because that is one of his better tracks. So we may see a Ty Gibbs first career win coming up these next couple of weeks. But number 4, going to put Willie B there. Willie B, like you mentioned, just one of those Ross Chastain, Chris Buschers, always reliable, can run, top 5, top 10 any day of the week, and, that's why he won the regular season points last year. So, Willie B's number 4, and then I'm going to throw Denny Hamlin in there, number 5. He did win Vegas last week, had probably the best car, but, this race today, I didn't see him better than top 10. I mean, granted, he was running as high up as like 6th or 5th. I feel like he just never had the speed that, Ty Gibbs and Chase Briscoe did. I mean, Bell was struggling too, but I feel like Denny Hamlin did not have the race that he needed, especially coming out from a win.
yeah.
Not a good bounce back week, but I mean, Denny Hamlin's capable, just like William Byron is, just like Blaney. Those are the guys that will continuously be in the top 5 of the power rankings. But some honorable mentions, going to throw all the RFK guys in there, specifically Keselowski and Buescher. Buescher's looking really strong to the start of the season, and Keselowski, I talked about this with you last week. The reason why Brad Keselowski can never get up front and lead laps and get a win is because he would qualify 26th or he qualified 28th, and then we go into Darlington. Keselowski qualifies top 5 and wins both stages and gets a second place finish. So, I mean, as long as Brad Keselowski is able to qualify well, he's going to be in contention. I think he's on the latter half of his career. I think one more win would be really nice for that RFK team just to get some momentum going for the rest of 2026. But that's going to wrap up everything we talked about for the Goodyear 400. Obviously out of 10, I'll probably give it a 6.7 out of 10, but, pretty good racing mid-pack. Up front wasn't as entertaining, but looking ahead into Martinsville, 750 horsepower package is going to be something to look at, especially at these short tracks. We saw how successful RFK was at the Clash, so very curious to see what's going on at Martinsville next week. But any final words, Mr. Nathan?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this race has been better than the last 2, Phoenix and Vegas, for kind of, in my opinion. This is a good race to kind of move forward. But yeah, I mean, like we were saying earlier, we apologize for the lack in the uploads the last couple of weeks. Just kind of ran into some busy times, and then our software for our filming wasn't working. So just be ready for some more consistent uploads here as we're getting things figured out at the start of the Checkered Flag Podcast. So we really appreciate you guys for listening, for tuning in. We're glad that the weeks we did miss were the more boring weeks. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I got.
Make sure you guys like and subscribe. YouTube channel is below with all of our links between TikTok and Instagram. Feel free to shoot a like, shoot a comment, engage a little bit in the podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the Goodyear 400. But, as always, take it easy, guys. We'll see you on Friday to talk about the pre-race for Martinsville.
Boogity, boogity, boogity.